start to ask the question, it unfolds the fabric of space itself, how it's made, what is it made of?
We're not alone in this universe. We never have been.
Alien intelligences have cohabited with us on this planet for millions of years.
We inherited the obsession from the Anunnaki. Anyone that still thinks that we're the ones that are obsessed with gold does not know enough about the true history of our species, how we came to be here, and the conditions that brought us here.
We are not unique in this universe. Extraterrestrials do exist. We are, so to say, the copies of them.
Have you ever wanted to know what channeling is? And what if you had an opportunity or an experience in channeling with an ancient alien mystic? Today we have Dr. Bruce Solheim, who will be at the Contact in the Desert 2021. We're going to talk about how a former Fulbright professor came to channel this ancient alien mystic. And what is the communication? Well, I'm ready to be the fly on the wall. And get your questions ready. Well, I'm Tony Sweet with Truth Be Told. Please welcome to the Truth Be Told studios for the first time, Dr. Bruce Solheim. How are
Thank
you?
you for that kind introduction.
Well, I'm so happy you're here. Like I said, it's always nice to meet new people, and I haven't had on the show before after almost 600 episodes. It's good to have new people.
Yeah. There you go.
Well, you're going to be at the Contact in the Desert coming up June 25th through the 28th. You're going to be doing a lecture titled "We Are Messengers: How a Former Fulbright Professor Came to Channel an Ancient Alien Mystic." So, I just had on the show talking to a lady about her near-death experience. Well, I want to talk to you about your experience because not too many of us on this planet, at least that I know of, I've heard of channeling, but not channeling an ancient alien mystic. First of all, let's go back, because you're also an intuitive. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've led a paranormal life. It's safe to say I since I was 4 years old, I've had paranormal experiences. So I'm kind of a paranormal lightning rod, if you will. Yeah.
Which funny is the lady before said she at 4 years old is when she started seeing her intuitive and psychic abilities. Is that like a number that is very important?
Well, probably when you first can recognize or remember. You probably had experiences before that as a baby, but can't remember them. And then I have a lineage. My mom was very psychic, so
I think it
comes down through that. She wasn't a professional psychic, but she taught me a lot of things about telepathy anyway.
Wow. Because I've heard that about a lot of psychic abilities are usually passed down through generations, and sometimes it skips, sometimes it's every generation. So was not only your mother, did she talk about maybe your grandmother and people before that?
Yeah, her mother was, she was a healer, kind of a herbalist and a somewhat of a spiritual healer.
Oh, wow.
Which for where they were from, where both our parents are from a remote island 200 miles above the Arctic Circle. So it's very remote, especially when my mom was growing up. She was born in 1919, which is a cool year to be born.
Right.
and she remembers her mom and her grandmother, I believe, who was actually from Sweden. So mostly Norwegian lineage, but I have one Swede in there too, my great grandmother on my mother's side. But anyway, they were kind of natural healers. So I think it does come down through the lineage there.
So tell us, growing up as a young Bruce, through your teens, it's hard enough to be a teenager, but having an ability like yourself, I mean, I believe all of us have an intuition and intuitive,
Sure.
but some of us is more enhanced than others. So, but growing up as a teen, how was that? How was that growing up?
Well, things happened to me, paranormal things happened to me very frequently, but randomly. So I didn't seem to have any control of it. I mean, I still don't have control. I'm able to manage it very, pretty effectively, but I don't like to say control because that assumes you have, some kind of very, advanced godlike powers or something, which none of us do. Thank goodness, right?
Right.
But so I experienced all these things, and I'm not sure that I really saw it as an asset at the time, because oftentimes if I tried to talk to, my teacher, of course, that wouldn't work too well. Polite society didn't want to hear about my special, friends that I played with that they couldn't see. So I quickly learned that you just don't talk about those things. I could talk about it to my mom, because my mom and I would practice telepathy, but my dad, he was an old school fisherman, carpenter, practical guy, and he didn't like my mom and I doing telepathy. We'd read playing cards. And we were pretty good at it, and he'd let us do it for a while, and then he'd tell us to put the cards away, and my mom would put them away, and not argue or anything, and then she'd look at me and wink. So I knew that, what we were doing was something that she thought was important, but we had to respect my father being, I don't know if he was afraid or just, I think that was part of it. He wasn't afraid of much because he was like the deadliest catch kind of fisherman up in Alaska.
Right.
And he worked in it. He was put in a Nazi labor camp during World War II because they lived under German occupation during World War II. So he wasn't afraid of much, but he didn't like the psychic paranormal stuff.
Well, I mean, especially back then. I mean, even till just in the last 15 years, 20 years, where people now, when you say psychic, they're like, oh my gosh, that's great, read me. But 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, people looked at you like, you were the devil. So yeah, I'm sure back then that wasn't a big thing.
I still get those comments, on some of my web pages and Facebook and stuff. People, well, they're not mean, they're just saying, are you sure you're not talking to a demon, that kind of thing. So there are people that are afraid of it, and I don't blame them for being afraid. There are scary aspects to it, especially if you don't know what you're doing or what's going on.
Right.
You can get yourself into trouble in a hurry.
Right. That is true. That is true. Well, truth be told, we talk about all kinds of paranormal, UFO, and since, you're going to be a contact, when did the UFO ancient alien come into play? Because that's a whole nother story.
Pretty early on, 1964 was my first experience with an extraterrestrial, and it was a lot of people talk about traumatic experiences, how terrible it was, and that type of stuff. And I'm not saying my experience at 6 years old wasn't traumatic, but it was actually an extraterrestrial saved me from a potential child molester who lived in our neighborhood, and he was able to make it so I don't have to go to that house anymore. And convince, my parents were convinced right away. I didn't even have to really tell them much that I didn't want to go to that house. They understood that there was something not good there.
Right.
And so that was my first experience. And he was scary looking, but as he told me at the time, he said, I might look scary, but that man in that house above the hill there is the real problem. He doesn't look scary, but he is. He's not good. So I was told to be, don't judge people by how they look, whether they're, ETs or humans.
Right.
You can never tell what's inside of a person. And so I'm very thankful for that. But I had a physiological reaction in that for 2 years, from age 6 to age 8, I had great difficulty speaking. I had a terrible speech impediment. I didn't have one before, but afterwards I had to be put in speech therapy because I could barely speak. It was just I couldn't get the words out, and when I did, they were, kind of like if you saw the movie The King's Speech.
Oh, right.
it was very embarrassing, especially, kids can be kind of cruel to other kids who have problems like that. So, but after 2 years, I started, getting to where I could function. And of course, now I talk for a living as a professor.
Right.
That's all I do is talk. So, so it's weird to think about that. But I did have so it was traumatic in the sense that it did cause, and that is one of the causes of stuttering, is a traumatic event, and especially a child's life. So, the bargain was that I had the traumatic, event that caused the stuttering, but I was saved from a potential much more harmful situation.
So, Anzar, how did he present himself for the first time? Because just the picture alone would scare the bejesus out of somebody.
Yeah. The cover is kind of scary, but he often tells me, he says, because I talk to him, when I communicate on my spirit walks, my meditative spirit walks, where I communicate with him and others in the spirit or alien world, quantum world, which I think are all the same. Sometimes I'll just hear him, and other times I'll see him, and sometimes he looks different. So he can look like a classic looking tall alien. He can also look like a proto-human, which is kind of what's depicted in the cover of the book.
Right.
And he can kind of look kind of scary. He can also look like a Southwest Indian Kachina. He has different, and he often tells me, I say, can I see you? And he says, depict me as you wish. That's what he often says. So he has the ability to look different ways. So yeah, choosing the cover of the book, I know it's a little frightening, but then again, the paranormal is kind of frightening, and it's okay if you can't just depict it as all rainbows and lollipops. This is serious business, and I think it's best to understand that, and also to convey the idea that just because somebody looks kind of scary doesn't mean they're a bad person.
Right.
So,
well, Anzar, what was his purpose to reveal himself or to be a part of your life? Was there a message, or is he constantly bringing you messages about, past experiences of Earth, your life, or what?
All of that? Yeah. So what happened was that in 1997, I had a vision with him. Now, he didn't call himself Anzar then, and I didn't really know that it was him when I was 6 years old. As I found out later, it was also him who had rescued me at 6. So he's been with me my whole life, even if I didn't know his real name. But in 1997, he presented himself in a vision. And when I say a vision, it means I'm awake, but I'm, like in this case, I was just sitting, I think, in the living room and had a vision of him, and he talked to me, and I saw him kind of revolving in space, and kind of this proto-human guise that you see on the cover there. And he told me he was the progenitor. So that's where I get the name the progenitor, which means the first or the original contact for us here on Earth, which is how he explained it. And he told me how the universe works, how the idea that it was almost a Zen-like conversation. He sounded like a Zen master, talking about the yin and yang. And so that was the first presentation in a long time that I remembered. I remember writing it down, every word that he said. I drew a picture of him, but I kind of kept it to myself because I'm a professor, and it wasn't until 2001 when I presented the drawing and what he had said to a fellow professor, and who I thought would be kind of cool to it and maybe accept it. She was an anthropology professor and studied ancient society. So I thought, okay, well, so I showed it to her, and she looked at me and she said, "You're a pretty spacey dude, aren't you, Bruce?" And I thought, okay, there we go. The person that I thought would be most receptive is actually kind of, standoffish. So I said, okay, I'm not going to do anything. So it wasn't until 2016 when a dear friend of mine passed away, Gene Thorkelson, who was also Norwegian American. He was an actor, very wonderful human being. Unfortunately died. He was only a year older than me, died of cancer. Well, a month after he died, he came to me in a vision like I described before. And when I talk about visions, the best way to describe it is like if you've seen a hologram, that's what it looks like. You see the person, the whole person, and you can interact with them. It's not like a tape loop where they're just saying something and you can't interact. It's an intelligent conversation. So he came to me in October of 2016 and told me it was time to tell my stories, because I had not told people. I was afraid I'd lose my job, I'd lose my tenure, my colleagues would reject me. So he told me it's time to tell my stories, and he even gave me the name of what the book should be called. He said it should be called Timeless, because where I am, there's no future, there's no past. It's all the eternal present. It's all happening at once. And he said, you have nothing to fear. You don't have to fear death, because I'm okay. And because I asked him, what's it like to be dead? And he laughed at me and said, I don't really feel dead. I'm just in a different place and everything is wonderful. And you need to tell your stories. And I reluctantly said, yes, I'll do it. And I came out with the first book, and then lo and behold, a second book and a third book. So the trilogy of 89 different stories, all of them based on that original contact with Gene, convinced me to do that. So this new book is just about the progenitor, just about Anzar.
Right.
So what happened is, after I started coming out with these books, I started doing these spirit walks in 2018. And I decided I'm going to try to recontact the progenitor, and I did on one of these spirit walks. And I asked him, what's your real name? And just want me to call you the progenitor? And he said his name was Anzar. So that's where I found out his name. And I've been in regular contact with him for the last 3 years. Now, when I'm doing these spirit walks, I need to make clear, I take my phone with me, and I do a voice recording of what I hear in my head, what I hear.
Okay.
And I record every word, because I didn't do that at first. And what would happen is I would do these spirit walks, do the spirit communication. I'd come home, and then I couldn't remember everything. It was very frustrating. So what I do is I hear what they're saying. I will say it into my questions and their answers back into my phone. And then I come home and I transcribe it. So from the last 3 years, I have about 300 pages of transcripts of these communications with other entities too, but also Anzar. So that's what I put into the book. At least half of the book is my communication with Anzar. So the wisdom, like you said, what he has told me, the wisdom he's given me, the prophecies, the predictions, the preparations, all that stuff is in the book. And it's been a wonderful experience, but at the same time, you never know how people are going to react to things.
Right, for sure.
I start the book out by saying that if you were to tell me 10 years ago that, you, Tony, speak to an ancient alien mystic, I would probably be very polite and listen to you and be, okay. And then I'll just, kind of, okay. And I'll see you later. And I'll think about it. I'll be very, naturally skeptical, right? I mean, that's a natural thing. I think skepticism is a healthy thing. But you should also keep an open mind to think more about it. And I knew that was going to be part of it, because it seems so out there, you hear it's one thing to talk about, okay, I've seen a ghost, or, I practiced telepathy with my mom and had these, miraculous things happen, or maybe even angelic experiences. But, or maybe even talking to the dead, some people could maybe buy that. But you're talking to an alien, and you're talking to an ancient alien, to your meditative state. That's a lot for people to accept. And you reach what the late Jim Mars, the journalist from Texas.
Oh, I love Jim. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful guy. He said people reach a boggle point. Their mind is boggled. It's just too much for them to accept. And so I start the readers off by acknowledging that there could be, that you'll have some skepticism, but I ask them to hang with me. And by the end of the book, I think you'll maybe be at least somewhat, if not mildly, convinced that there might be this connection. and that's how I approach it. And then the first half of the book is all theoretical stuff. It's heavily footnoted and endnoted. So for people who love research, I did a lot of research on how the spirit world, the quantum world, and the alien world are all really the same thing. And so I build a case for that. There's a lot of information out there. And then I go into the transcripts. and start, what I said, what he said.
Right.
And at the end of the book, if people want to go right, I don't like to usually give people shortcuts, but let's just say that if you want to go right to the end of the book and just see the 45 most important things he's told me, it's all listed there. Also, his predictions or prophecies are also in there, some of which have come true, which is absolutely amazing. He predicted there would be in 2019. He predicted there'd be a series of calamities. He predicted in September of 2020 that there would be what he called a pocket revolution and internal turmoil, and even what he called it an insurrection. This was in September of 2020, and then of course we know January 6th.
Right.
What has been come to be known as the insurrection. So, and before all the, after that, Memorial Day, he warned me about Memorial Day and that of 2020.
I was
and
going to say this
there
Memorial
would be,
Day.
there would be civil disobedience. There would be civil unrest throughout the country.
Right.
So these are all things. And he always says, predictions can be wrong, but preparations are never wrong.
Right.
So he gives me ideas of what could happen and be prepared for it, which, my wife Ginger and I were very well prepared for the pandemic because we bought a generator, we bought extra food and supplies. So we weren't exactly what you would call a preppers, but, we were on that side of it,
Right.
and very well prepared and weren't caught off guard. So that's the kind of stuff he can do. But more importantly, he's been preparing me to help people with what we're going through right now. And that is what people have come to call disclosure. But I prefer, and Anzar prefers not to call it disclosure, because disclosure means somebody's giving you information. He said he calls it revelation, which there's a biblical revelation, which is kind of scary. But this is revealed to you personally. So this idea that there is an intelligence from outside of our Earth, a non-human intelligence. The fact that there are really UFOs, it's not just a TV show or a movie, that this is real. All this is coming to light. And people are going to go through a revelation when they understand and internalize it. And they're going to need some help in guiding them into the future, because a lot of people are going to fall off in either direction. They're either going to be, I don't believe it at all. It's just, they'll have a total denial, or they'll become way too into it, thinking that it's everything, that the aliens can save us and do everything for us. When what Anzar has told me is that their job, at least the good ones, because there are some not so good aliens too. That's the bad side of the story, but not to freak anybody out. But there are those like him and others who give us, as he calls them, nudges to help us, guide us, do the right thing. But experiencers like myself and others, and I don't think I'm anything special, but I have a mission, that's for sure. A lot of the fellow experiencers that I have do have a mission, and it is to help people to remain cool and calm as we go through what Anzar calls a leap of consciousness into a new era, what he calls an era of reconversion, which is kind of an interesting term, meaning that we're converting back to our original selves, how we were as ancient people, where we were totally connected to the universe and the earth and nature. And so we've kind of lost our way in our modern industrialized technological society of what is really, really important.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you. I think, technology has advanced us greatly, but technology has also kind of disconnected us from our spirituality in a lot of ways.
Yeah. No, you're right. I see people who are connected to the world every day, plugged into the whole world, but yet they're so lonely and depressed. And but a fellow human being is only a few steps away.
And they're both on their phones.
Yeah, they lose the interaction, the personal thing. So I think we can have both if we kind of put them together and figure out a way. And I think I do have confidence that we can do. I tend to be guardedly optimistic. So but I think we're going to have a lot of turmoil, as, like I said, some people are going to be cool with this revelation. Other people, they'll go off in one other, direction, and it could cause a lot of conflict. And as you know, some people just when they reach that boggle point, they don't exactly act in a most rational way,
Right.
as we see almost every day, and then of course you have those that are mentally ill, which no fault of their own,
Right.
are going to react in a certain way. So we have to help all of them. We have to, so the show you do, the show other people do, the Contact in the Desert.
Right.
This is all a way of helping.
Well, let me ask you this:
fellow humans.
There, we're going through a paradigm shift, and
Yes.
do you feel the Mayan calendar 2012 was the beginning, or do you feel it's been happening for a lot longer that we just really didn't notice it? Because I do feel the last several years a difference in a connection to the other side.
I think it's accelerated, yeah, and it's come to a point where we are now.
Right.
And I think that I think there is something to that. I'm not an expert on the Mayans, but
Right.
I do know a lot of people who have talked about that. People in some of the discussion groups that I'm part of, and I think it's all been stages or preparatory stages getting to where we are now. And that being said, this idea, I don't want people to think that, because they use the media uses the term disclosure all the time, that people can't just sit here in their homes and just wait for the government to tell you what to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think they'll be very disappointed, because I know we got this big report coming into Congress,
right.
But I would be extremely surprised if it's a totally open disclosure like a lot of people have thought it would be. It's probably going to be very guarded, because all the information that you do get that kind of dribbles out is that they see it as a national security threat.
Right.
So that tells me they're going to say as little as possible just to keep people kind of at arm's length while they try to figure out how to gain some kind of strategic advantage. Now that's us, but you can imagine they're doing the same thing in the Kremlin or in Beijing, right? They're thinking, or in any other, in Tehran or any other capital. And I want to share this with you, and I want to make sure I get the wording right. And this
please.
is one of the bits of wisdom that Anzar gave me. The best part of the book is what he says, not what I say. So I want to get the words right. So he said, extraterrestrial technology and wisdom are precious gifts for all, not a strategic advantage for the few.
Wow.
So if we're thinking that we can somehow capture this technology and knowledge and wisdom and use it, strap a bomb to it or do something to gain advantage over others, we're missing the point. The point is it can't be used for that. If it could be used for that, it would have already been used for that. The aliens would have stepped in and done all kinds of stuff, but they, as Anzar says, we can't do everything for you. And he always used the word nudge, which makes me laugh every time he says it, because I know he's saying it to be funny too, because you don't expect an ancient alien mystic to use the word nudge. But he says, we give you nudges to do the right thing, to make the next advance. And that's what we're getting, a pretty strong nudge right now.
So,
and
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's going to be difficult for people. It will be difficult.
I always wondered why, because aliens and extraterrestrials and UFO sightings have been around since the beginning of, before man, but I'm sure.
Yeah, ancient times.
Ancient times, because we're talking about Anzar, who's an ancient,
and
mystic.
the progenitor. Yeah.
So my thing is, why didn't they just present themselves to us when we were? I mean, they did, like Egypt and the Mayans and all these people that were. But why did they disappear to where we got used to not seeing them, and now they became this myth, and now we became more afraid of them, where they should have just or could have just stayed around and become part of our society? And why do you feel they disappeared from our consciousness of existence?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. The best way I can understand it is that they wait for certain events or progress that we make to give us the next nudge.
Right.
And I think what caused the since since World War II, when we started developing nuclear weapons, that's when they became extremely interested, because they are, from my understanding, they are, and what Anzar tells me, they're not going to allow us to annihilate ourselves. And it's not just for our benefit, it's for theirs too, because there's something very special about, when I was a kid, we called it the big blue marble, right?
Right.
This precious earth of ours. Right. There's something very unique and special about it that they want to preserve as well. Probably because we're all related, which is what he has told me too. So obviously you want to preserve, your heritage and so forth. So they want to help us, but they can't intervene in every case. So because I had somebody ask me, they said, well, if they're this powerful and have been around with us for so long, why do they allow terrible things to happen? Famine and tsunamis and tornadoes and this pandemic, wars. Why did they allow World War I and World War II, where millions of people died and suffered? Because we still have free will. And they're not going to allow us to annihilate the whole planet, but they will allow us enough free room to make mistakes, which we've made plenty of them. And they're trying to help us to learn from those mistakes. And that's an evolutionary process. So that can be very slow, although it's accelerated recently. Right. As we see, I mean, everybody's got a feeling. I think Yvonne Smith, the world-renowned hypnotherapist, who's the president of CIRO, she's also a big part of Contact in the Desert usually. And I'm not sure if you've interviewed her, but she's a great lady. But she has said that in the last 10 years, especially, there's been an accelerated sense of urgency from the experiencers that she counsels and does hypnotherapy with. And I feel it too. I think you feel it. A lot of people feel this, that there's a sense of urgency and a mission focus that's becoming more clear. And I think that we have to take that leap of consciousness as a society and help those who are stumbling, who are not able or just can't understand what they're supposed to do. And the thing that ties all this together, that is a counterpoint to the people who have said, "Are you sure you're not talking to a demon?" My response to that is, well, I understand your fear and skepticism. That's natural. But what Anzar tells me every time I talk to him is he reminds me to keep love in my heart and operate from a position of love. Now, if he was a demonic entity, he would not be saying that. Right. He would be encouraging me to do, terrible things, or to do greedy things, or things to benefit myself, just in a greedy way. But he's always humbling me all the time. For instance, there's a very funny thing where I just had a really good discussion with him. He kind of told me how propulsion works, and these ET craft. And then I thought, man, and I walked out. It was nighttime. I do this every night. I go out and look at the stars. And I looked up and I said, I think I'm really starting to understand. And then I heard his voice as a little reminder. He said, "Oh, you have no idea." So it's just, okay, big shot, you think you know everything? No, you don't. You better keep listening. Okay, kid, come on, you got to keep listening. So it kind of knocked me down a couple notches, and then you get back up and you keep going. And that's what he's been doing for the last 3 years, is helping me. And I've documented all of his words, all of his wisdom, like I said, his predictions and prophecies. And it's interesting. In January of 2020, he told me, he said that the pandemic originated in a lab, and it was an accident. That's what he told me. He said it was an accident. They didn't do it on purpose, but it was an accident. Right. And so that's what he told me in January of last year. And then, of course, there were theories, and those theories were put aside. And then the WHO, the World Health Organization, went to China to investigate. Oh, that's probably not possible. And now all of a sudden now it's coming out. Everybody said, "Oh yeah, it probably originated, probably an accident." They want to be clear, they didn't do it on purpose. I mean, who would do it on purpose when you think about it? Right. Especially your own people. So likely an accident, but of course, this is what Anzar told me in January of 2020. So
that's great. Wow.
I think it's important to keep in mind that that people, this idea that they should not be afraid. I understand the fear, but we have to work through that fear.
Right.
Because when people are afraid and people are angry, which a lot of people now are very angry and very in our, especially in America, division after division,
Right.
within a division, when we're angry and afraid, we're not very smart.
Yeah. Well, you don't make
Not
the
very
best
compassionate
no.
or any of the good things that
Right.
help society along. And so we're using our reptilian brains, that this idea that fight or flight, but to use our frontal lobes, to really think and accept this idea of a leap of consciousness. It's going to take a lot of effort, and we have to work through the fear. And I always say, shows like yours are helping people explore this change that is occurring for all of us on this planet.
And that's one of the reasons I started the Truth Be Told, because I always said my truth is not your truth and your truth is not my truth, but by us having a conversation, it brings us sometimes the knowledge to go seek this out ourselves. So
exactly, that's the revelation, that you reveal it to yourself.
Yeah.
It comes in, you internalize it, rather than somebody, waiting there and going, I hope they tell me the truth.
Right.
Boy, I hope they really do. This disclosure. It almost makes me cringe when I hear it, because it sounds so other directed.
Yeah.
How are you going to really believe it? If somebody, because then they'll say, okay, yes, this, and you go, wait a second, I don't think that's true.
Yeah, like you waited all that time just to say that. Well, we're gonna take just a quick break because we gotta promote your upcoming lecture and Contact in the Desert. So we're gonna be right back with Dr. Bruce, and you can go to his website. And no, it's not Doctor. It's just Bruce. Is it Olav?
Yeah, BruceOlavSolheim.com.
There you go. And
we'll find everything there.
Yeah, find it all there. But we're going to be back because I have a couple more questions for you before we get out of here. So
thank you.
When you start to ask the question, it unfolds the fabric of space itself, how it's made. What is it made of?
We're not alone in this universe. We never have been.
Alien intelligences have cohabited with us on this planet for millions of years.
We inherited the obsession from the Anunnaki. Anyone that still thinks that we're the ones that are obsessed with gold does not know enough about the true history of our species, how we came to be here, and the conditions that brought us here.
We are not unique in this universe. Extraterrestrials do exist. We are, so to say, the copies of them.
all right, we're back, and we're talking to Dr. Bruce Olav Solheim, and that's your Scandinavian
yes,
name
definitely.
right there. But we are back, and we're gonna talk a little bit more. But before we do, we need to promote your lecture coming up on June 25th, Friday, June 25th, 4:45 to 6:15. Can you tell us a little bit about your lecture?
Yeah, it's basically the same topic, but in a lot greater detail. And I have a lot of interesting slides and some more stories to share, and a lot more of the wisdom that I have a little bit more time, and I will also do questions and answers, a Q&A after the presentation. And I'm just looking forward to this. I was supposed to be at Contact in the Desert last year, but of course it got canceled.
Right.
So I would love to be in person, but it's going to be a virtual conference, and hopefully next year it'll be in person again. And but I did go in 2019. Not as a speaker, but just to listen, and I loved it. I listened to so many different people.
Great speakers.
I listened to Linda Moulton Howe. I got to meet Russell Targ. I got to meet Eric von Daniken. I remember from high school reading The Chariots of the God. I mean, it was so awesome. I got to meet so many cool people, and it's great people watching too, because there's interesting people. There's some people that really, they dress in different,
Right.
almost like a Comic-Con.
Right.
And then you got, more serious kind of, lecture, just give me the facts kind of people, and nuts and bolts versus the philosophy and the spirituality. So it's a full spectrum. And I think our speakers reflect all of that. So there's something for everybody.
Yeah.
And I'm very excited about not just delivering the lecture and the question and answer, but I also get to be on a panel discussion.
Oh, you
too,
do?
with
What's the panel?
some other people. Yeah. I think the panel discussion, is on Sunday, but I can't remember, Saturday or Sunday, but I'm on it's the alien abduction panel discussion.
That's going to be great. Well, get your
with
tickets.
some other scholars, and it'll be great. And I just, it's so much fun. And, it's better than nothing having the virtual thing, but I think people will enjoy it.
Yeah. And like I said, get your tickets at contactinthedesert.com.
Mm-hmm.
Get it today or before June 25th through the 28th, I think is what it is. I can't read it. Yep, 28th.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to be a great year with speakers as always. I mean, they always have great, but we're fingers crossed next year it'll be in person. But like you said, at least you get to participate. But well, one thing before we have about 10 minutes left, and one thing that when you were talking about how UFO or aliens don't really step in unless we pretty much are going to destroy ourselves. It almost sounds like they're gods in a way, or parents in a way, just because the way they look out for us.
Yeah.
Why? What are we a part of? I mean, why do they care so much?
That's interesting. And, I'm a historian. That's my job, my day job, if you will. And if you look at how how the old world ventured into the new world and how they approached it, it depended on who it was. You had the missionaries that would go in there to save the souls of the Indians, right?
Right.
You had the merchants to go in there, the gold seekers, the fur trappers to make money, and and a lot of times they worked very nicely with the native inhabitants. And then you had the conquistadors, those who came in that wanted to take over everything and enslave them. And so I think that's kind of how it works. When you have a society that has superior technology, you're going to find a menu, of different options for how they're going to approach us. So, and I can't help but think, I was reading this story, maybe you read this too, about this Stone Age society. There's still Stone Age societies right now on Earth. And one of them is on a place called North Sentinel Island in a remote location in the Indian Ocean. And people have tried to approach the island, but the islanders will viciously attack them. They've killed people who've tried to come too close. So they've kind of left them alone. And they're afraid of outsiders. They live in their society. Who knows? Do they live well? I don't know. People don't know much. But that's kind of how people think about how we might imagine how, because I try to get into the mind of, and I talk to Anzar and he tells me this stuff. That's what he told me. Look at your own history and tell us how you've done, because he'll say there's some ETs that don't really look out for our best interest. There are others that do. And there's some that are kind of neutral, which is kind of the way sentient beings approach those who have less technology or less evolved than we are. But they are not gods. He's made that very clear. Because there is, as David Bohm, the physicist, said, there is the explicate order or reality. That's what we have right now, the nuts and bolts kind of stuff we have around us. And then there's the implicate reality or implicate order or objective reality, which is the quantum world. That's how the universe really is. Right. How everything's connected. And that's where the aliens and where the spirits, the ghosts, they all inhabit that implicate order. And then there's the super implicate, which is above that. That is the ultimate consciousness, the mind of God, the creator, whatever, you want to call it. And so there is something above them. They are not gods. They have superior knowledge and technology, obviously. Otherwise, they wouldn't be zooming around our jet fighters and, I mean, incredible G-forces and speeds that are beyond our capabilities. But yet they're not really trying to hurt us, which is, I think, a key indicator. Even those ETs who don't have our best interests at heart work through humans to do whatever devious kind of things they want to do, which is to, and I think that's what happens. We're really doing harm to ourselves,
right?
And encouraged by it's kind of the way Anzar explained it is they kind of use humans as proxies. Like a superpower would use a proxy army to impose their will in a third world country during the Cold War. That's kind of what would happen. So, and then there are those who are looking out for people, looking out for us and doing the best they can, but all the time realizing we have free will, which is the tricky part,
Right. Which is, and I just have a couple more questions, and unfortunately I might have to have you back because there's so many other, after contact's over, we'll have to have you back a little more, get in depth on some other things. But did Anzar ever say not who he was, meaning like what race he was, what planet he's from, what dimension he's from? Did he ever mention any of that?
Yes, he has, because I've asked him, and he said he was originated from very, very long time ago, from the Orion constellation, and specifically Rigel, the Rigel trinary system. And so he's mentioned that a few times. And since I was a kid, I've always been fascinated by Orion, and a lot of people love Orion. It's a very easy constellation to pick up in the night sky. Usually in the fall is the best time around here. But so he has told me that, and he's of mixed origins, but from that area. Now, it's funny how he said in the Orion constellation. Yes, there we go. And now that reminds me of when we go overseas and people say, where are you from? What do we say?
America.
We say, we're from the United States. I'm American.
Yeah.
And then they might ask, well, where in America? And you say, well, in California. Oh, well, where in California? And then so you can get more and more specific. For our understanding, if he says the Orion constellation, we know where that is. Most of us know, we've seen it, right? So that's what he would use as a reference point.
Right.
And it's interesting the way that works. And anyway, that's what he has told me, and that I'm very satisfied with that answer. And it makes sense because I've been so obsessed with Orion since I was a kid. I still am. I try to find it every time I go.
Oh, really?
Look at the night sky.
Yeah. I've always been fascinated. I mean, I think most people, like I said, unfortunately, until these came into play, most people used to look up to the stars. Now we're all looking down at our phones, but I think there is always a fascination with space and other worlds, and I remember talking to a guy from NASA how every year, every 10 years, we find more and more and more planets that can have life on them, and I mean, space is, oh my gosh, unlimited amount of planets that could to house people, well, not people like us, but creatures and other beings. So yeah, I think that's the fascination with what humans have with space. I think that's why we're always trying to go further and see further, and
we're interested in our ancestry.
Yeah.
And that's the progenitor tells us that, that's what he told us, so, or told me. And so the book is about that. It's about my love of space since I was a kid. I mean, I grew up in the 60s, so the moon shot was everything to me. Yeah, like many other, I wanted to be an astronaut. I was a pilot in the Army, but I never became an astronaut, so that's as close as I got. But still, that's pretty cool. Well, but I do want to say that the theoretical basis behind all this is that the spirit world, the alien world, and the quantum world are all really the same thing.
Yeah, that's what I was.
And that helps explain how this can be, how this can happen, and why ghosts come and go, at seemingly vibrate in and out of our reality. Aliens do the same thing. They're in the same realm.
I love it. Well, unfortunately our time is up, but this is one of those subjects that never get old, because again, we've been wanting to know answers for thousands and thousands of years. So was there anything that Anzar would leave our listeners, to something that we can work on that he says I capture 45 of the most interesting bits of wisdom, but I'll share one which I think is very important for all of us. Great. Each and every one of us. And that is, he said, you know what will happen in the future because you manifest it. So when you think about that, what is going to happen in the future? Are we just sitting around idling, or are we making things happen? And that's what he's saying. He's nudging us to manifest our own future. If you want peace, then you live a peaceful life and you promote peace, and that's, that it seems very simple, but it's actually quite hard because you can get derailed so easily. Oh yeah. I mean, I'm an ADD person, so squirrel, bird, all that stuff. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. I can't wait to see you in about a month, or less than a month now. But for everybody out there, please go get the book, and you can get it on Amazon, and go to the website. I'm sure anywhere books are sold, you can pick it up.
Yeah, that's true.
All right. Well, again, make sure you get your tickets for Contact in the Desert. It's going to be June 25th through the 28th, 2021. All virtual, 60-plus speakers. And if you can see on the screen, there's tons of people that you love and admire, and love to hear new things, or even just recapping old events. But it's always fascinating. But thank you, Dr. Bruce. I appreciate you. And
thank you.
And then until next time, everybody, take care of yourself. Share the show. Subscribe to us, and leave us some great comments. I appreciate it, and we'll see you soon.